Hey, welcome everybody to another edition of Coffee and Contracts. I am your host, Rusty Whitten of Car Commercial Realty, and I am excited about this episode today. We were talking about it a bit in the green room before the show, and this is kind of a big full circle moment for both me and Dave Harris here, who is on your screen, as we started working together in 2017, almost 10 years ago, Dave, which is wild. You came to my little hometown of Corinth, Mississippi, and we connected for a previous employer for both of us. And it's been a fun journey kind of watching each other grow since then. And Dave is an expert on scaling and growing practices. So I thought, who better to have this conversation than with you? And so welcome to the show, Dave. How are you, man?
I am great, man. Thanks for having me, Rusty, and love the full circle comment. It's really nice to see kind of where you've taken your journey and over the last 10 years. And as I look back over my career, seeing where that journey has taken me, and I still kind of feel like we're just getting started, and looking forward to back and forth today and just having a good conversation.
Yeah, for sure. Dave is the CEO of Pro PT now, and excited to watch him in that venture and grow. We've kind of been watching each other from afar and cheerleaders for each other, liking posts on LinkedIn and Facebook and the different places where we're sharing milestones and celebrating and watching each other grow. So now we can kind of celebrate and turn some of that growth into a conversation that I'm excited to learn about. And I know others out there are, as this is a topic that I see a lot, Dave, where people are looking to scale their practice, right? Like they've got a successful practice or two, and they've got that entrepreneurial itch to see like kind of where can I take this? Where can this journey actually take me? And you've had that, you've been down that path. Do you mind sharing a little bit of your story, your background with scaling and kind of your professional development?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I've been in this profession for 27 years now. Well, just about 2 weeks shy of 27 years. So
That's awesome.
for me, it started very early. When I graduated, I started working at a local hospital as a clinician, and then I was introduced to a specialty program, lymphedema. And so went through that process, did the coursework, and that's where scaling really kind of started entering into my mind. I would have patients come to the hospital from an hour, 2 hours, 2.5 hours for this service because it wasn't available anywhere else. So that's where the idea of scaling really came to pass. And it started with one person in a closet in a hospital. Actually, we had a plinth table and what was a storage closet. And in about a year and a half, we turned that into 6 full-time clinicians treating exclusively lymphedema, and ended up with like a 6-month waiting list. So wow. The idea of scaling from there was, man, these people are coming from 2 hours away for this service. I bet we could do this out in the community. So that's kind of what started the vision, and was just very fortunate along the way, and have always been fortunate. Have had so many great mentors and leaders see potential in me, and allow me to kind of paint a picture for them of like, this is what could be. And I'm a firm believer of begin with the end in mind. And if we can do that, then work backwards to what we need to get there. I think that's the biggest step. But, from there, I joined our former employer. We worked with Benchmark or Upstream, and started a program for them. Same concept, one clinic, one clinician. In a few years, we grew that to about 19 different clinicians, and we were servicing 2 states, Tennessee and Georgia at that time. So, and it just kind of kept snowballing from there. Hey, have you ever thought about leading a clinic? Well, no, but I'd love to talk about it. So it went from a clinic to multiple clinics. And then really probably about 2010, 11, I took on an integration role. It was a part-time role at the time. So I was a regional director at that time, and it was a part-time role. We were starting to look at going into more states than Tennessee and Georgia, and just started working with smaller practices that we were partnering with, to kind of bring them into our platform, get them to understand how to run the business in a better way, how to treat people in a better way, and really just giving them the tools to do that. So that was probably one of the better experiences of my career. I did that for about 8.5 years, and really over that time, was able to work with probably 50 plus different partners that we partnered with over the years. And what you learn there is every little piece of the business, and you understand. I think I began to understand that you can't be the best at everything, and quite frankly, you can't even be good at a lot of things. So it's really about focusing on who can I bring in, or what tool, or what process, what technology now is most important.
Sure.
Bring in to ease the burden of my clinicians to let them scale themselves and scale their individual clinics. So, kind of fast forward a little bit, I joined a great mentor of mine with a different company in pediatrics, and we were able to take something that was very small and grow it into, I think we went to about 140 clinics in about a year and a half. Really fast pace. Enjoyed the time there, and when he left, I made the same decision a few months later, and took on a COO role with a great company out of New York. And we were able to kind of do the same thing. We doubled the size of the organization in a few years, just by putting some simple things in place. Some of them were complicated, some were simple. But put those things into place, always staying very centered around the people, because we're a service business. Physical therapy is I put it up there with one of the best service businesses out there, and what we do is a true calling. And so I love what we do every day, and look forward to it every day. So fortunate enough to join Pro PT back last November in this role. And, we're 20 clinics at the moment, and we should be somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 or so by the end of the year, and kind of trying to do the same thing. And it's in physical therapy, it's a unique profession, but it's something that I think we're just scratching the surface of the need of the communities around the country. They're so underserved, and there's so many people that can utilize this service. So scaling is an easy proposition. Sure. It's doing all the other things in the background to make sure that you can scale the right way, and quite honestly, just not get out over your skis and do too much too fast. And then you end up with a mess on your hands, and you got to kind of stop, reboot, recalibrate, and then start over again. So I really try to focus on let's do it the right way the first time. Made a ton of mistakes in my career, as we all have. But hopefully I've learned from some of those, and we'll be able to kind of bring this vision to life with Pro PT. And right now, I think we have an excellent team. We've got the right people in the right places. We're making some key hires to really set ourselves up for success in scaling, versus just saying, hey, let's go lease some space, put a PT in there and a PTA, and let's start a clinic. It's more, let's get all of the pieces in place and grow systematically, versus just kind of throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what works.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I appreciate that. That's exactly what we're looking for here in today's episode, especially as we're talking about scaling. You kind of already started this process, and I appreciate you sharing your journey to get here. But you mentioned a couple things I want you to elaborate on, because you kind of brushed across them, and I think they're very, very important. First, you mentioned having a niche to scale. Yours specifically was lymphedema to start. Is that a good place to start, having like a specific niche? Have you found more success just with like a general expansion across like your clinics? What does that look like, kind of launching out a journey of scaling?
I would say it's starting out, it was a niche because I needed to become good myself, right?
Sure.
And make sure that I was providing a great service. But I think now, and really in the last several years, I think keeping it more open. And so, yes, general orthopedics, but adding those specialties where you see the need. So a lymphedema, a pelvic health, things of that nature have become much needed in our profession over the last several years. But I think keeping it more open in general, so you can offer services to more of the population, that's kind of where I would keep it. And that's where we've been more successful. The niche services are great if you're 1, 2, 10.
Yeah.
But if you're going to scale to 5,000 clinicians, you're going to need to offer a wide variety, and that's where the general kind of keeps it a little bit more in place. So
Sure.
you can treat from from young to older, right?
Sure.
And you're kind of treating through the lifespan versus just, hey, this specific thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. You also mentioned the people that have been on the journey with you, right? Like from clinicians to colleagues to people kind of ahead or with you on this journey. I think that's probably one of the most important things to talk about when you're first looking at scaling or building a business in general, even if it's just like your one shop. Talk about what you look for in people to bring alongside, right? The right people, put them in the right places. You mentioned that earlier. Like, what has that looked like for you?
When I'm looking for people, it's two things for me. One is culture. When you're in the interview process, or what I would call the courting phase, you're looking for that person that is going to not necessarily agree with everything you say. I don't like yes people, and you're looking for people that are smart, talented, and have the personalities that will fit in with your mix. Okay, that's one piece of it. The other part is people that have that ambition and drive to be better, and so I think those are two of the key points that I look for. All of the other stuff we can teach, right? I mean, what we do is not that complicated in my mind, right? We bring a patient in, they're diagnosed, a plan of care is designed, and they're taken care of, and you take them to that plan of care. But the real key is not being the great clinician and being able to diagnose them and treat them. The big key is getting them to come back to this and value the service, right? Because you can be the smartest person in the room, but if somebody's not going to listen to you and follow those instructions, then it's kind of useless. It's not going to help them.
Sure.
So I'm looking for someone that has a personality and a really a purpose-driven passion towards what we do. And that's not just the clinician. It's the front office, right. It's the technician, it's the folks in the back office, it's the vendors that we use. I want vendors that are going to look at us as a partner, and we can sit down and have great conversations and difficult conversations, and everybody walks away with their feelings intact, and understanding that we're a partnership. And if we're going to go from 20 to 100, how are we going to do that together? So those are kind of some of the few of the things that I would look at.
Yeah, I think, I made some mistakes, kind of like you talked about in my scaling journey, opening multiple clinics for Benchmark out in the Carolinas. But finding the right people, when you finally got them in place, it just was like you could just feel the culture shift, and they had a like-mindedness, and they were able to catch the vision. And then you could trust that same culture and product was going to be across the brand in the area, representing you and what you stand for, because you found the right people. And I'm not talking just clinicians. You mentioned front desk, account managers, salespeople, all have to be pulling in the same direction with that same vision for a culture. And if you can lay that foundation early, then the rest of it, like you said, is the easy part, the treating of the patients. But establishing that culture early on day one is key to making this a successful venture.
That's right. Now, look, you have to be willing to walk away from the table with some people. And it's I found through our my career and just the journey that I've seen is there were times when you were so desperate to bring someone in, you would hire them, and knowing that was probably not going to work out. And so it's trying to fight that urge, and it's worth waiting a little longer to get the right person.
Sure.
And versus just hiring someone, they're in there 30 days and they're like, oh, this is a mess. And then you have to start over. And what's the damage that you've done to your current team?
Right.
So you have to rebuild trust there. And then you got to go out and rebuild trust in yourself, on your skills and who you bring into the organization. So I would encourage people to hire right the first time, and look, none of us get it right every time.
Sure.
Because everybody comes to the interview, or most people come to the interview on their best behavior, right?
Right.
And so you don't really know until they get in what their skill set is, how they're going to do. But you should be able to assess their personality, their passion for what you're doing. And make sure that you're trying to focus them on career development and growth versus, hey, this is just a job.
Yeah, that's really well said, because it's worth being a little extra busy for a little bit longer to make the right hire versus rushing into one because you think it's going to be a good fit or you just need to fill the space, right? You just got to, that's where that culture comes in. You got to have your team believing like, hey guys, I want to make the right hire here. So it might be a busy season right now, but just know it's because we're trying to find the right culture fit to come alongside you to help this thing grow. And I think if you can communicate that to your team, then everybody gets on the same page and the journey goes a lot smoother because they know there's a light coming at the end of the tunnel. This season's not going to last forever, but it's busy because you want to do it the right way.
Yeah, I would agree. I had a mentor of mine that I worked with just in my past role. And he was always big on giving the update without an update. And I think it ties directly back to this of, hey, we haven't hired anybody yet, but understand, guys, we're looking for the right fit. And please, let's continue to focus on working together to make this a success.
Yeah, and like you said, sometimes that right fit is going to bring, the best way to say that, I think, is like healthy challenges, to where they may look at the system in a very productive way and say, hey, here are some friction points or some things that I could see from my experience that might become an issue down the road, things that we might can improve. And on us, as leaders that are working towards that scaling, you have to be comfortable enough with yourself and your product to have that difficult conversation and hear that feedback. Because like you said, yes men and yes women are only going to carry you so far. And it becomes frustrating after a while, because out of challenging conversation and some of that friction comes some of your best growth. And it may launch you in a different direction, or your ability to expand becomes easier because you've had that difficult conversation and worked through some difficult things. But it strengthens your relationship with your coworkers. It strengthens the foundation of your culture, because you're able to look at a problem from different areas. And like you said earlier so well, walk away with your feelings intact, but you handled and navigated difficult waters in a very productive and professional way.
Absolutely.
So looking back, what was the biggest inflection point that really accelerated your growth? What was the decision or the process, or was there a specific moment where it was like, okay, we've put this in place, or this has happened, and now we can truly start to grow our brand?
I think it goes back a number of years. Actually, David Myers had this conversation with me. You remember Dave? From Upstream. But he had a conversation with me one day. I was very intense with my treatment. I loved being in the clinic, and it was very hard for me to separate. I mean, when I was a regional director, I think I don't know, 20 plus clinics, I was still treating 3 10-hour days a week.
Yeah.
And developing people to kind of take over and go out and open new clinics. But he said, where are you better served? Are you doing a better service by treating 10, 15 patients a day on your own? Or are you better cultivating the talent that you have around you and hiring the people to come in and do that? Are you better to recreate 100 people to do that, or 100 people to lead a clinic, or multi-site clinics? And that was really the inflection point for me of like, okay, I need to go one way or the other. And so that's where I made the decision to really go into that idea of scaling people. And if you scale people the right way, the other things you can put in place. And so that really started it. And then as I began to understand how smaller practices and even larger practices, we all have kind of the same problems and the same struggles. But as I began to understand the different struggles they had and the multiple departments and the multiple roles within the organization, that's where I really started taking on the idea of we as PTs have a certain knowledge, but we need people that have knowledge in other areas. But we also need to start looking at what are we doing systematically that's probably holding us back. How can we refine our processes? How can we have our expectations laid out up front versus kind of beating around the bush? Let's let people know what we expect. And then really in the last probably 10 or so years, probably more than that, the technology has just skyrocketed. And so looking for different technologies, different innovations that make it easier on patient treatment, from documentation to billing to the front desk, to scheduling patients, to verifications. There's so many different technologies there. And then even from our relationship now, who's helping you with your real estate? It's a really bad day when you walk into an executive meeting and you hear that, hey, we forgot about this lease, and we didn't have a renewal on it, and so now we're kind of at the mercy of the landlord.
Absolutely.
And then you're crawling to the landlord saying, hey, love it, we want to be here, and those situations happen.
Sure.
But I think one of my key ideas here is having professionals that do this every day advocate for you as the one leasing the properties, to make sure that all the T's are crossed and I's are dotted and things of that nature, and it's just bringing someone in that has an expertise in a different place to make sure that your business is not going to suffer. You're not going to walk on Monday morning and say, hey, we've got 30 days to be out. And I've been in that position, to where we were told, hey, you've got 30 days to be out, and we had to go find another place and really kind of rush to get something started. Now, in today's world, I don't think you could start a clinic in 30 days.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, that was a fast and furious 30 days, and we were able to do it, and it was stressful, but I don't think you can do that today.
Yeah, and that's a great segue as we start talking about when is the right time to start to scale. Having people along the journey with you is huge. Us from a real estate standpoint, we can manage and take a look and keep track of when your leases are coming up due. So that's one less thing you have to worry about, since that's a specific niche. But you kind of talked about having to be reactive there for a little bit, right? Like, oh, I've got 30 days to get out. We got to find a new space. We got to go. Did you find yourself early on, or maybe at different seasons, kind of scaling more reactively? Or has it always been intentional? Or if it was reactive, how did you get it back to being intentional?
Yeah, I've been very fortunate. I think that was probably my one reactive issue there, where we were we lost the lease and things happened, and we kind of made it go back.
Sure.
I think you have to be responsive to the needs of society from a global standpoint. And in our profession, we know that, 10, 12, 15% of the patients out there that need physical therapy are getting it. Right. So there's no reason to be reactive. Although a lot of times we feel like we might be. It's more, you get the people in place in your current existing locations. You make sure that's stable and not only sustainable, but it's still scaling, right? A mature clinic should continue to scale year over year, and there's a max out point at some point,
right?
But I think from a scaling perspective, is we know the need is there. We continue to find the people, and then in the background, we're always looking to improve what we're doing from a process standpoint. We're always looking to improve how our clinicians, how our front office, how our back office, how they're functioning, so they don't burn out.
Right.
That's a big key these days. And so I would say it's more of a responsive scaling than reactive over the years. And for us, it's really doing the research, looking at the data that's out there, and in this case, look at the communities around you. What's the population? What are the demographics? What's the payer mix? What's the actual need? And then for us, especially since COVID, how many therapists are in the area, or who can you bring to the area? So, and then outside of that, it's really training people up. So when we bring a clinician in, one of our focuses on the interview is, hey, are you interested in leadership? Right? Because I can't continue to open clinics if I don't have people that want to operate them.
Right.
So we really talk a lot, from day one about verticality of the therapist and autonomy of a clinician. We want our PTs to be autonomous in their practice, which I think we've done a nice job over the last 25 years leading to that. but we really want them to understand what that means and train them on that autonomy, not just in clinical care, but in how they operate a business. So we do a lot of background and back end business training, helping them to understand, because you know as well as I do, I didn't get one single business class in my training. And so understanding how to build a plan, but then also understanding how to execute on the plan. Because, you know, we have a million MBAs out there that know how to build a plan, and it's wonderful.
Right.
But what are the steps to get there? And that's the key part of getting people to understand how to do that. And then lastly is keep it simple. You know, don't go out and put a spreadsheet in front of your clinicians every week that has, 25 KPIs on it. We really need 4 or 5.
Right. And, yeah.
Yes, there are 25 KPIs or whatever out there that there are people looking at and making sure we're fine tuning. But what we're putting out there in front of our clinicians needs to be simple. They need to understand it in 30 seconds, and they need to be able to run their business. And that business is 4 walls for them. They need to be able to understand that community and that piece of it.
Especially when you're looking to scale and scale intentionally, that's when the idea of the whirlwind versus the wildly important goals, the WIGs, come in handy. That was a big talking point in my days at Upstream, was being able to figure out in the whirlwind, which we're all in a whirlwind every single day of the 40X model, finding what is that most wildly important goal for that day, that week, that moment or metric or whatever you're looking at, that's going to improve and allow you to continue on this path of success. And if you constantly throw your team into the whirlwind, like you said, with 25 KPIs or a dozen different things to look at, or you throw somebody in that mix a little too soon, who, like you said, when I came out of grad school, I had a great education on how to treat patients, but my business class was design a private practice, have a cool logo, and plenty of swag to give away. And that was it. And so the first time I was handed a P&L, I was looking at it like a calf at a new gate, because I didn't know what I was looking at, how I was supposed to manage this, or what half of this stuff even meant. And so being able to pull your clinicians and your team out of the whirlwind, give them bite-sized pieces to evaluate, can help not only for scaling, but just in running a successful practice. As you mentioned, the people and having them at the right place at the right time so that they're not getting overwhelmed and inundated with too much data.
That's right. That's right. And then, lastly, I think, we as a profession, we have to pay our people well. We have to make sure that we're bringing in the innovation and technology to reduce cost on one side, so we can actually, return that to our clinicians, not necessarily return it to ourselves as owners, but return it to, the people that are running the business. So there are so many factors in there, and I'm sure we can't cover, we can't scratch the surface on that today.
Right.
But it still leads back to the simplicity of give your people the tools, make it simple, and get out of their way.
Yeah, absolutely. So the right time to scale is when you are ready, when you're ready for scaling and not just growth. And then when you start that process, like, what are some ways to know that you're scaling at the right time, right? Because there are risks at going too soon, and there are risks at waiting too late. And so the best way to start scaling is what, in your opinion?
I would say, first of all, have your foundation solid. Like, in our case, when we started this adventure, we had 19 clinics. We've opened 1 so far this year and a couple more coming up next month. But it's get those foundational principles in place, make sure those clinics are running smoothly. And then when you go into opening new clinics, I mean, you kind of have a general idea. You need to know, when should this clinic be at break even and when should this clinic start making money? So how I know that we're scaling well and intentionally is those clinics are at a profitable state in about 3 to 4 months, right? And you made a great decision there, right? The volume's there, you're hiring therapists, they're getting busy. The physicians around you, the community knows who you are at that time. So I think it's a lot of that side of it, but there's so many things you have to do before that. So it's making ssure your brand awareness is out in the community before you get there.
Sure.
Okay? It's making sure that you have a nice visible space where it's easy to get to. people, you don't find something off a back road. Go find something that's out front and center, has red light access. It's not, turning across 4 lanes with no real red light.
Right.
So I've been down that road before. But I think the best way to start scaling is make sure you also look at your internal, not only processes, but systems. Do you have everything? Do you have the team or the technology to handle additional volume?
Sure.
So looking at those things and just look again, if everything is running smoothly in that 3 to 4 months, you know that you made a good decision. If it's not, you need to kind of debrief on what maybe went wrong, and kind of put the facts out there and look at it and say, okay, here's what's going on. How do we correct course? And then you just kind of make those changes, similar to 4DX, right? I mean, you go in and you find out what's the 1 or 2 things I can do today to make this better, and you just keep moving progressively forward, from a daily to a weekly to a monthly to an annual basis.
Sure. And you kind of touched on this a little bit there, but flesh it out a bit more. Like, having that infrastructure is so important. You can't just wing infrastructure when you start to add multiple clinics. You have to have something that's repeatable, reproducible, that's easy to communicate across the brand. And so I kind of touch on that a bit more before we move on. Like, how important is that infrastructure before you start adding more volume and more clinicians?
Oh, it's extremely important. I mean, look, if you don't have, and let's just say if from an RCM standpoint, if you don't have the right number of people or the right outsourced billing department, and you bring on all this new volume, you're going to have active claims sitting there and not getting billed, right? Or no one following up on things. So, you even something as simple as that, or when you're looking to open 2 new de novos or 15 new de novos in a year, do you have the right facilities team in place? Do you have someone following up with your contractors or your real estate, but all of those different things on a regular basis? How's your front office running? How's your back office running? What's the EHR system that you're using? How are you, is it functional? Is it easy to learn? All of those different things. I mean, and those are just a few of the hundreds of things that have to go into place to make sure you're ready to scale. But it's not only having infrastructure, but it's also talking about infrastructure on a regular basis and looking at where are the pain points, not on a quarterly or a semi-annual basis, but on a monthly basis. Where are the pain points, and is there anything that we can do about it? And if there's not, then do we have the right system? Do we have the right vendor in place to do that? So, that's a small piece of that.
Right. And you kind of talking about those pain points and that infrastructure. I think there's a specific, it's almost an art, but almost like a talent to talking about infrastructure and KPIs without talking about infrastructure and KPIs all the time, especially for those that are a part of the journey that may not be on the cutting edge of that growth. Because there are some people that are just, for lack of a better term, they're just worker bees, and that's their role and that's what they want to do. And so there's a fine line with your high performers and people who are growing who need to know these KPIs. And you talk about the infrastructure and the most important, the wig that you're pulling out of the whirlwind from a very technical, high level way. But there's also an art to being able to communicate that to people on your team in a way that it's like, hey, we're talking about numbers without talking about numbers, right? Because I don't know what your experience is, but every new grad I hired came out of PT school with this tunnel vision of like, I only want to treat my patients. I don't want to talk about numbers. Not realizing that some of those KPIs are vital to the way they treat their patients and how they care for them and make them better. So there's almost an art to that communication, I would say.
There is. I mean, in my mind, I still say keep it simple. I mean, in reality, the numbers are really a product of the care, and all of these KPIs and when you look at top line revenue and EBITDA and all expenses, all of those things, those are all just a byproduct of what you've done. So in conversations with clinicians on a daily basis, no, I don't want a bunch of KPIs in front of them. I want them to understand, how are you treating your patients? Are they showing up for your care? Are they buying into you as a clinician or as a clinic? And are they actually coming in to get the care that they need to get better? Because if we can do that, all that other stuff will happen. like we'll have the numbers that we need. We'll have the revenue that we need to actually continue to grow the business, continue to pour back into the communities. So if we overcomplicate it, which we in PT tend to do that sometimes, we love our data just like everybody else does.
Sure.
And there's nothing more exciting than getting this great spreadsheet and saying, oh wow, look at what we've done, and trying to give that out to someone. But it doesn't need to be that complicated. It needs to be, we are here to care for as many patients, clients, customers, whatever you want to term that. We're here to care for as many people as we can that need it, because we know that we're just scratching the surface on that side of things.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So we've talked kind of around it, but I want to talk about some tips and lessons learned along the way as we start to land this plane. I appreciate you dedicating some time to talk with me today and educate me and have a good conversation over a cup of coffee. But I'm going to talk about a D word that's really scary when it's your brand and it's your baby and you're starting to scale and grow. The D word is delegation. So what role does delegation play in scaling? And how do you know or trust that you're delegating the right things to the right people along this journey?
Delegation is massive. No one can scale a business on their own. They have to have people and teams in place to do that. So it really starts with trust of the people that you hire. And I'll even go back a step further: hire the right person or the right people. Gain that trust. Look for people that have the resume to kind of do what you're needing done. Especially when you go into different departments. Because if they've done it before, you've got a really good chance they can do it again. And that's one of the things I've seen as a faltering point, if you will, in a lot of practices that are from say 1 to 10 clinics. The founder or the owner, they have a really hard time letting go of anything or delegate it, because if it can be done right, it can only be done right by that person. You've got to get that mentality out of your head. You can't do it all on your own. You've got to have really high quality people helping you, high quality technologies and processes helping you do that. So delegation is, it's not hard for me at this point in my career, but I can tell you it was very hard to kind of jump over that fence and get to the point where I was like, okay, sure, Rusty, I'm going to trust you with the leases of this organization. Or, hey, vendor, I'm going to trust you with making sure my equipment gets to the clinic the week before opening and making sure my clinic is set up right. Sure. So a lot of that is, there is some trial and error in that. But when you start talking about that side of it, it's you've got to have trust in the people that are around you, and you've got to always be looking ahead. And in leadership, you need to be looking ahead 12, 18, 24, 36 months, and make sure that you've got people in places, in positions that you can trust to run the day-to-days.
Yeah, absolutely. And lastly, on tips and lessons, you kind of talked about it, like your vision casting, you're looking out 12, 24, 36 months, and that's fun. And that's easy. That's the dreaming portion, the fun part of building a business. Talk a little bit about, and you kind of hinted at this some, I'm sure I'll know what your answer is, but like you're doing that vision casting down the road, but how are you maintaining quality of where you are today while keeping your eyes focused on the future?
Yeah, you've got to keep it in our business. You have to keep it front and center on patient care. So what are the outcomes of the product you're producing? And so are we losing patients at visit number 2, or are we getting them to complete a plan of care of 10 visits or whatever? And then at the end of the day, did they gain function? Did they gain strength? Are they back to lifting their grandkids or back to work? So I think keeping it that simple, that's how you're keeping the quality there. Sure. When you kind of go to the back office side of it, are you getting more denials? Are you what is your first pass rate when you're submitting claims? Are you seeing people that are not authorized for treatment? Like, those are some of the little things that you can look at, and again, they're not complicated, but your care is staying in a good spot if you're measuring your success through what we have as outcomes. You're successful with your team if your retention rate is good, and we went through a bad phase, a couple of years ago where people were just going all over the place, and are you keeping your team intact? Are they staying around? Are they happy with their job? Is their job satisfaction there? I mean, on your annual employee surveys, are they answering and giving you good constructive feedback on things you can change and improve on? But are they also saying, hey, look, I'm happy with what I'm doing. I like what I'm doing. This is a good work environment. I think that's how you're doing it well. And the other part is how are the communities responding when you go into a new community? Are you sitting there 2 weeks with no patients in the clinic? Or are you really taking the 90 days before you open the clinic to let the community know that you're coming? And then you have 10 or 15 people in there day one. That to me tells me that you're doing things in the right way.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense, because if you open the door and nobody's there to come in, what are you doing? Maybe you moved a little bit too soon or didn't communicate it appropriately, and having that proper communication early is huge.
Absolutely.
And as we, last couple of questions, again, I appreciate your time today. What's one mistake that you made that you'd like to warn others about in your scaling journey?
For me, I'm a big relationship person, and I think I truly believe that if you bring someone on your team, or I did believe, if you bring someone on your team, you do everything in your power to make sure that person is successful. And quite honestly, I would warn people against that. And ultimately, if you've got somebody that's not the right fit, not the right person, you're only hurting them and your company and your team if you let them stay on the team. So going back to the old adage of hire slow, fire fast, I think there are a couple of instances in my career where I let my care for the individual get in the way of what was best for the organization.
Sure.
So try not to make those mistakes.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Lastly, what does successful growth look like for you now in your role? As you've been an operator, you're now more into that executive type role. What does successful growth look like for you now?
For me, it's seeing other people become successful. So it's seeing that new clinician or that new front office person or that new billing coordinator or whatever, HR generalist come into the organization and watching them actually build a career over 3, 5, 10 years in an organization. Seeing a clinician go from staff clinician to vice president of operations, things of that nature. Those to me, that's true success. And it's not necessarily about what you're putting in your bank account or anything like that. It's like, how many people can you help along their journey? And it's almost like returning the favor. I've had so many people do it for me, and they still continue to do it today. How can I continue to see people become successful?
Yeah, absolutely. Love that, man. Well, Dave, I really appreciate the time today, man. This is a fantastic conversation. I know I learned a lot. Hopefully somebody else out there did, but I really appreciate you taking time to talk with me today.
No problem. Thanks, Rusty. It's always good to see you, man.
Yeah, likewise, a lot of fun. And so if you all are out there looking to scale and looking to grow, I hope that you found some nuggets in here. For me, it's you can't go it alone. You have to have your infrastructure in place and always be willing to pivot. Make sure that you're evaluating what is the most important thing today and looking at ways that you can improve that process going forward. So if you have any questions, you can always reach out. I'm going to link Dave's LinkedIn profile here in the show description. Shoot him a message, reach out if you have interest in scaling, joining Pro PT, or any questions for him. And as always, you can shoot me an email, and I'd love to make that connection. But I'm Rusty Whitten for Dave Harris. This has been another great episode of Coffee and Contracts. We'll see you back here next time. Go be a friend to somebody who needs a friend, and we'll see you soon.